In the vast expanse of the African land, there existed a goddess of remarkable beauty and power. She was the goddess of fertility. Whatever she touched begins to grow. One day, she descended upon a desolate and dry terrain. She poured her oil, and the land began to spring forth bountiful crops. The people of Ikoja found this land flowing with milk and honey and decided to dwell there. The people of Ikoja became gluttonous and grew terribly fat from overeating. 70% of the villagers in Ikoja were obese and oversized, and the ones who managed to maintain a healthy body weight did so only thanks to their genetic makeup. The people of Ikoja developed a terrible habit of wasting perfectly good food. The village was filled with the stench from leftovers and rotten foods they always threw away from having so much. Unknown to them that the supreme being did not accept wastage, and therefore the oil that blessed the land began to diminish with every grain that was wasted or thrown in the trash by the people. The fertility goddess watched as her pot of oil went down each day, and she was very sad because the moment the oil is exhausted, her essence as the fertility goddess will end and she will cease to exist. Something had to be done before the oil is completely exhausted. In the heart of the blessed land, amidst the abundance and plenty, reigned King Eze, a figure of immense girth and insatiable appetite. Known far and wide for his voracious appetite and love for indulgence, the king's palace became a haven of merriment and revelry, where feasting with delectable delicacies and festivities knew no bounds. There was a long-standing tradition that at the end of each harvest year, the people of Ikoja would be required to present a hefty portion of their bountiful harvest to the king, a tribute meant to satisfy his ever-growing appetite and fill his barns to the brim. This was done on the Iriji festival, where the villagers would celebrate another bountiful harvest at the king's palace. The women would dance as the rattle bells on their feet would echo throughout the palace, creating a rhythm against the heavy beats from the drums that gladdened the hearts of every villager present. After presenting their portions, a new head of chief would be appointed by the king, one whom would be given the king's signet ring and would become his right-hand man. The new chief would enjoy the same level of authority and reverence from the people as would be accorded to the king. In the village of Ikoja, ambition ran deep in the hearts of three men, Abasi, Efosa, and Chike. Abasi was the richest villager who owned the largest harvest. Efosa came in second, and Chike was the youngest of them, who competed with them. Though Chike was not as wealthy as the other two, he would not back down in his quest for power. With the three men bound by a lifelong rivalry and fueled by their desire to attain the coveted title of chieftaincy, they spared no efforts in their pursuit of glory. But beyond the fields of competition lay another battleground and a fight for power between the wives of the three men. Chika, the wife of Abasi, Adama, wife of Efosa, and Orika, wife of the youngest Chike. It was a fierce competition among the men, such that the loyalty and support of their devoted wives became the key to their victory. Blessed with beauty and charm, these women stood behind their husbands, offering counsel and assistance in their quest for supremacy. Back in the palace, with the king's insatiable quest for power and sustenance, King Eze devised a cunning plan to ensure the perpetual flow of food into his palace for generations to come. With the aid of his trusted town crier, he dispatched a proclamation to the men of the village, decreeing that the next chieftaincy title would be the last to be given by the king, and the one deemed worthy of the chieftaincy title that year must not only present a bountiful harvest, but also produce a male heir who would inherit the responsibility of feeding the king and his descendants forever. Meaning, after the last competition, there would be only one chief whose lineage would carry the chieftaincy title and continue to produce those that would be next to the king and his heirs to come. But this decree got even worse when the king announced that all those who had registered for that year's competition could not take back their names, and anyone who failed would be stripped off of the rights to their farmlands, and all their harvest would now be managed and controlled by the newly appointed chief. This outrageous law from the king sent shockwaves among the men of the village, but behind the king's decree lay a sinister motive to take over the majority of the farmlands, a ploy suggested to the king by Chike to ensure that he becomes the new chief, while the king, through him, would gain access to the largest producing portions of land in the village owned by the other two richest men. Only the 3 richest men of the village had submitted their names to compete for the title: Abasi, Efosa, and Chike. For Abasi and Efosa, this news was a declaration of doom as they grappled with the realization that their fate hung in the balance of producing a male offspring to secure their legacy and save their farmlands. These men of Ikoja found themselves ensnared in a web of deceit and manipulation, and so, as the competition intensified and the pressure mounted, each man embarked on a perilous journey fraught with uncertainty, where the path to victory would be shrouded in deception and betrayal. As the Harvest Day festival drew near, Abasi and Efosa threw themselves into their preparations with fervor and determination, as the devastating truth of their barrenness pricked the heart of both Abasi and Efosa. But on the other hand, for Chike, the youngest competitor, he had a son. He could not hold his joy after hearing the king's new decree. Faced with the grim reality of their barrenness, Abasi and Efosa, consumed by desperation, turned to the whispers of the wind and the secrets of the ancients. In the depths of the night, they sought out the elusive medicine men, masters of potions and charms, willing to go to any length to fulfill their deepest desires. Abasi and Efosa were given very strong and potent potions to drink that would help them produce male children. They took the drink and prepared to go back home to their wives for action. Meanwhile, Chike, ever vigilant and cunning, anticipated his rival's desperation and took preemptive actions of his own. In the cloak of darkness, he sought the guidance of a juju priest who gave him a black calabash imbued with the power to disrupt the natural order of life, designed to thwart the ambitions of Abasi and Efosa. Under the cover of night, Chika crept silently into the chambers of his rivals, his heart filled with mischief and deceit. With careful precision, he placed the black calabashes beneath their beds. This calabash would make the 2 men produce anything but a male child. And so, unbeknownst to Abasi and Efosa, their fate was sealed by the hand of their cunning adversary. They went back home to their wives and procreated that night. Just like the medicine men predicted, the wives of Abasi and Efosa found themselves with child. With each passing day, the air crackled with tension as the women would taunt each other through the corridors of the village. Each claimed supremacy over the other, convinced that their unborn child held the key to victory. As the power of the black calabash began to take effect on the 2 pregnant women, one fateful night, Efosa's wife got up and began to travel with the child in her womb beyond the waters, leaving her husband behind. When Efosa found out, he ran helter-skelter looking for his wife and got lost in the chase. He would be unable to return back home before the day of the festival until he finds his missing wife. Chike was gladdened by this as his first rival had been eliminated. Abasi was next in line. In the celestial realm, the fertility goddess sought counsel from her fellow spiritual beings. Desperate to find a solution to the dwindling potency of her sacred oil, it was the goddess of rain who, with a voice as gentle as a summer breeze, urged her to descend to the land and deliver a message of warning to the people of Ikoja. Unaware of the goddess of rain's ulterior motives, the fertility goddess heeded her advice and sought permission from the Supreme Being to descend to the mortal realm. The Supreme Being warned her to put on the golden cloak that would give her human abilities before leaving for the earth. With this solemn warning ringing in her ears, she donned the golden cloak that would disguise her divine essence and grant her the guise of a mortal. But as she reached for the cloak, a sudden betrayal unfolded as the goddess of rain, cloaked in deceit and treachery, struck from the shadows and cast the fertility goddess down from the heavens. With a heart heavy with sorrow and betrayal, the goddess plummeted towards the earth. It so happened that it was the same day that the goddess fell from the sky that Abasi's wife was in labor, and as the charm of Chike took effect, the boy child that had been promised Abasi by the medicine man was swapped to a girl child as the spirit of the fertility goddess was drawn into the boy child coming from the heavens into Chika's womb. As the skies roared with thunder and the heavens wept with rain, Chika labored amidst the tempest, her cries mingling with the tumultuous fury of the elements. It was a tumultuous labor as the thunder struck and the lightning shined on the faces of the midwives. Abasi waited anxiously outside for his wife to bring forth life, and when she finally gave birth, fear and shock filled the air. A baby covered in grass was born. When the child was presented to Abasi, he was shocked and terrified. First, it was a female, and second, it was a thing never seen before. Angered by what his wife gave birth to, he stormed off home, leaving his wife behind, alone with the midwives. His wife cried her way back home, holding the mysterious baby in her arms that night. When Chika returned home, her husband screamed at her in anger. With eyes ablaze with rage and anguish, Abasi lashed out at his wife, his words a venomous torrent of condemnation and scorn. He was truly ashamed of what she had brought into the world. Meanwhile, Chike was in his house, smiling to himself, knowing that his schemes had begun to take effect, eliminating his rivals from his path. Back in the palace, news went to the king about the ongoing rivalry that occurred among the villagers. This pleased King Eze's heart so much. "Leave them, let them fight," he said. "The more they fight for the title, the more my barns will be filled with food," he said as he washed his hands in a bowl. Within the confines of Abasi's home, the air hung heavy with tension and despair as the weight of disappointment bore down upon Abasi and his wife like a crushing wave. With the heart of Abasi gripped by fear and shame, he could scarcely contain the turmoil raging within him, his mind consumed by the realization of his shattered dreams. In his eyes, his wife and the girl child stood as a symbol of his failure, a vessel of shame bearing the burden of his dashed hopes and ambitions. Every sight of the girl child stood as a reminder of the reason he would be losing his lands and would not be given the chieftaincy title. A seed of hatred sprouted in Abasi's heart for the mysterious child the gods had given him. Because of the failure Chika knew she had brought to her husband with her offspring, her hatred for the girl child grew even worse. Severally, she attempted to take her life using different means, but always she failed at doing so, as the mysterious child refused to die but grew stronger each day. To make things worse for her parents, the girl child was dumb. Aside from the baby's skin that had grass growing on it, the child did not have the ability to speak. She could only hear. She was totally different. Her parents named her Oya. On the day of the Iriji festival, only Chike showed up in front of the king as a competitor. He took all his produce and submitted to the king, presenting his son to the king as a suitable hand that would be passed down the responsibility of farming for the royal house. He was accorded the chieftaincy title and was made the new chief. Immediately, the lands of Abasi and Efosa were handed over to Chike, and he became master over all the produce coming from the villagers. Abasi and Chika, who were the only ones still present, were totally shattered by their defeat and lost all their lands to Chike. Many years after this tragic event had taken place, as the years went by in Abasi's home, Oya grew up in solitude and rejection. She was treated very poorly by her parents, who were unable to get over the heartbreak of the losses they suffered, losing the ownership of their farms to Chief Chike. Abasi and Chika starved Oya, hoping she would die. They never gave her anything. All they used her to do was fetch firewood from the faraway forest for them. A good-for-nothing child, a child with bad luck, a child that made them a failure was what they saw her to be. And so, Oya grew up not knowing what the love or touch of a mother felt like, but amidst all this ill fate she was facing. What was worse for Oya was the fact that because she did not put on the cloak before coming to the world, she had forgotten who she was, that she was the goddess of fertility, and she did not remember the message which she came to the land to deliver. She lived an ordinary life like every other village child, but she was skillful and learned things so quickly, a gift which her parents failed to see in her. That she was special and not just different. She was skilled in sewing, and in her loneliness, she started making a beautiful garment for herself, which she would put on when she became a big girl. As she grew older and started gaining wisdom, she began to understand that her parents hated her and never wanted her in their presence, but she never knew the reason why or what she did wrong. Even as a little girl, she did her best to please them. Her parents would always keep her locked at home in the day and only let her go out at night just to fetch firewood for them. One day, while she looked outside her window, she could see little children playing. Perhaps, she thought to herself, maybe they will like me if I go to play with them. So she sneaked out to go make some friends. When she got to the children, she tried to communicate with them using her sign language, but the children all ran away in fear when they saw the form of Oya for the first time. Saddened by their rejection, Oya began to realize that truly she was different from everyone, as people ran away whenever they saw her. She went home, and with a heavy heart, she turned the beautiful gown she was making for herself into a gown with a mask that covered the entirety of her body, that would not let any part of her skin show. Then she went to try again to play with the neighboring children. This time, they called her Ojuju Calabar. Some laughed, while others ran in fear from her even more. Oya returned home with a shattered heart, as even a mask could not shadow how different she was or perform a magic to make her the same like everyone else. As the years went by, the cruelty of her parents increased, always forcing her outside the house at night. But for Oya, this became an opportunity for her to make friends, not with humans, but with the trees, flowers, and plants. She felt a deep connection to the green leaves and plants. She could understand them and felt like they were talking to her, and she had the special ability to speak back to them. She would always stop to play with the plants in the gardens at the back of people's houses whenever she was on her way from fetching firewood, while she watched during the day as the children played with each other. One day, her parents sent her to get firewood for them, but on that fateful night, as she was in the forest cutting the wood, she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. Shocked, she turned to see who it was, but could not find anyone. While she was walking back with the firewood on her head, she heard the same footsteps again. In fear, she ran home, and luckily she was not harmed. She told her parents she felt like someone was following or watching her whenever she stepped outside the house at night, but they shut her up and did not listen. They continued asking her to go out at night. Fearfully, Oya would leave the house to get firewood, always hearing the sound of the person following her from behind that she could not see. This continued for many years, and as the years passed, Oya grew up into a big girl, but one that had no real contact with the outside world. All she knew was the darkness, the woods she had to cut, and the unknown figure following her at night. A real purpose of being on the earth completely lost and absent in the memory with which she came into the world. As the people of Ikoja continued to enjoy the produce of the land, with their glutinous king and the people wasting the excess food, the golden oil continued to run dry. At a point, all that was left in the goddess's pot was only a little amount of oil. The land became dry again, and nothing they planted grew on it, and if anything did grow, it would be spoiled crops not fit for consumption. Soon, the people began to grow lean as starvation crept through the land. The only person left with food was the king. Leading the entire village, Chief Chike marched to the king's gate, pleading to see the king, but the king's gate was locked against the villagers as they died from starvation. They would call upon the king for days, but he would not come out. One day, Chike was able to bypass the guards and force himself into the king's chambers. Holding on firmly to the king's leg, he pleaded to the king to share some food from his barn. It was the hard work of the villagers that the king was still benefiting from, but the king was angered by this. He told him, "You are here begging me for food. Do you not know that it is against the law of the land for the king to give food from his barns? Instead of you to go out and find out what is causing the land not to produce, you are here upsetting my peace. Anyway, I would send food down to you because I am not a wicked man, but only if you find out the cause of this problem and solve it before it is too late and my barn starts to suffer." The king sent Chike away. Chief Chike tried to consult the chief priest to know what they had done wrong that was causing their problems. After the priest made the consultation, the name that came out from the oracle's mouth was Oya. Chief Chike, on hearing this, interpreted this to mean that a person named Oya was the cause of the problem in the land. He later found out that this child was Abbas's only daughter and that she was a mysterious child. With the hunger growing worse and worse and the desperation of the people to get some food from the king, the eyes of Chief Chike and the villagers turned to the mysterious girl in the house of Abbasi. In no time, Chike led the people and they came marching to Abbasi's house. "We know you are the one that has done this. You have set the land against us because you were not given the chieftaincy title by the king. Don't think that I do not know. You are doing this to us to revenge, so we will die of starvation." Bring out that mysterious alien daughter of yours. We know that you used her as a sacrifice to the gods in exchange for them to punish us." Abasi and his wife were angered by these accusations from Chief Chike and said to him, "How dare you accuse us of such?" they said. "It is not enough that you took our land. You want to strip us off completely from everything we have by stirring up the king and the villagers against us?" Chike said to them, "If you are indeed innocent, bring out your grass daughter. Let her explain what is happening to our crops." In anger, Abasi and his wife dragged out Oya, who was already peeping at them in fear through her window. "Take her and do whatever consultation or anything you like with her. You will not bring the final destruction to me," her father said to her as they gave her up to the villagers and left back into their hut. And so, the people of Ikoja took Oya captive. They began to question her on why the plants that were supposed to be growing on the land were growing only on her skin, but she could not speak as she was dumb. She was given 7 days to make the land start bringing forth vegetation again, and if she didn't, on the 7th day, she would be stoned to death. So they dumped her into a pit to await the 7 days. Oya sat inside the deep pit crying hopelessly, afraid and confused for 2 days without food or water. She kept thinking of how her parents gave her up so easily to be killed. In the darkness she sat, with no hope that she would live to see the next week. On the 3rd day, someone called her from the top of the pit. As she raised her head, she could see an old woman in black beckoning on her. She was totally surprised that someone showed up. The woman called to her and said, "Oya, are you still alive?" The woman sent down a rope and Oya climbed out of the hole. They ran to a nearby hut at the edge of the forest. The woman introduced herself to Oya, that she had been the person watching and following behind her all alive when she was sent out at night to fetch firewood. She began to tell her that she was a very spiritual woman who knew about the coming of a special being and the sufferings that she would endure on the land. She began to try to remind Oya of who she was before coming to the land. Oya explained to her using her sign language that she could not remember anything. "Try harder, try to remember what you are." But this was impossible for Oya. Sensing that her memory might have been blocked by the emotional turmoil Oya had experienced all her life, she began to do things to soothe her troubled soul. Speaking to her inside the hut, she said to her, "Do you know why people fear you?" she asked. Oya shook her head, saying no. "Because you are different," the old woman said. "Man's greatest fear is the fear of the unknown, and whatever men fear, they seek to destroy. This has nothing to do with you, beautiful one, but everything to do with them." Saying this, she said to Oya, "I will now have to return you back to your O. Tomorrow, we shall continue with a ritual that I pray to the gods would help you remember who you were and the purpose of your coming here to this land." Oya did not want to return back to the hole, telling the old woman that she would be killed. "Trust me," the old woman said, "I am doing this for your safety." So she returned Oya back into the deep pit. The next day, surprisingly, some villagers came to the hole to see if Oya was still inside. They could see her sitting firmly inside the pit. She looked at them with pain in her eyes, but in her heart she understood why the old woman returned her back to the pit. After they had left, the old woman came again and got her out. She began to feed Oya certain ancient concoctions and made incisions on her body, performing the rituals to the best of her knowledge that would help Oya realize who she was. On the 5th day of the ritual, she told Oya to go and stare into the river and look at her reflection without turning away her gaze until she sees herself in her true form. "The water will reveal who you are," she said. And so, Oya began to stare, but saw nothing. The 6th day, she continued staring in the water, and then, like an unprecedented wave, Oya began to see beyond the physical realm, going above the heavens, but it was too much. She collapsed into the arms of the old woman before she could see beyond the sky down to her former dwelling place. "It's okay, my daughter," the old woman said to her. "Tomorrow is the final day you were given before you would be stoned to death by that evil Chief Chike and the people. I have done my best. Your fate now lies only in the hands of the gods. I will pray for you, my child, that the gods may spare your life and save you from the inevitable death sentence hanging over your head. But make sure you fight. Fight until your last breath to remember who you are. The person on the inside will be the one to save you from the world. Fight for her." She said this and with much pain returned Oya for the last time back into the dark pit. The next day, as the land remained barren, Chief Chike and the people began to handpick their heavy stones. They marched in their wrath to where Oya was and brought her out of the pit. Oya tried to speak but could not. At the order of Chief Chike, the people raised up their stones to cast upon her. Oya prayed inside her heart, calling on the old woman, "Mama, help me." And suddenly, the clouds turned dark, but the people did not realize. As the first villager was about to cast his stone, something never seen before happened. A surge of power entered into Oya as she looked to the sky as if possessed by an unseen force. Immediately, she began to grow larger and larger until she became a huge giant looking onto the villagers as ants. Chief Chike and the villagers, abandoning their stones, began to run for their lives. It was in this instance that Oya remembered who she was and the message she had for the people of Ikoja. In her godly state, she could speak, and she began to say, "I am the Fertility Goddess, the one who causeth your land to flow with crops and food. Up until this day, you have abused my gift, and my oil has almost run out. This is my message to you. After this time, if you continue in this wicked manner, your lands will be permanently barren, and I will not return again." Her voice echoed all through the village. After saying this, she stooped down and poured the last drops of oil on the land, and the land became alive and began to produce again. Then she went to the old woman and thanked her for helping her. "Thank you, my goddess," the old woman said to her. Oya made the old woman the new leader of Ikoja, but before she left, she visited the palace and chased down King Eze and took him along with her as she left for the celestial realm, never to return again. Chief Chike was ashamed of himself. He begged Abase and his wife, confessing all that he had done to get the chieftaincy title. Her parents lived to regret how they had treated so badly the gift of a child that was given to them by the gods, and from that day forth, the land of Ikoja was led by the wisdom and tenderness of the old woman. The people began to appreciate the foods they were given and privileged to have, and did things in moderation, not wasting even the tiniest grain of food, but using it to help other neighboring villagers in the far distance. The lesson to be learned from this story is that we should be aware of the spirit of waste. God does not like wastage. Let us appreciate all that we are blessed with, whether little or large, for when we do not waste, we do not want. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you on our next story.